If you live by the praises of man, you'll die by their criticisms. That is just one of the gems that my guest dropped on this episode. Hey everyone, this is Anthony Franzese. I am the host of the Successful Working Parents podcast, the podcast where we talk to successful working parents. Go figure. Sonja Holmes is a senior recruiter, host of the Own Your Work podcast, and mother of four. This is a really, really inspiring and motivating conversation. Sonja created her podcast, but was held back by fear and doubt for 4 years before she finally pressed publish. And she has a lot that we can learn from that experience. I appreciate you listening. Let me know what you think about the episode. If you would, click the follow button, leave me a rating. That would mean the world to me. It's the best way to help grow the podcast. Anyway, on to the show. Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents podcast, the podcast where we talk to successful working parents. My guest today, she is a senior recruiter. She is the host of the Own Your Work podcast and a mother of four. Ladies and gentlemen, Sonja Holmes. Sonja, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to talk to you today. So usually we just kick off with a little quick background on your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a senior recruiter. I've been recruiting for like a decade now. But before that, I went to school. I got my bachelor's in communications. Right out of college, I started in a management training program for a big rental car company you might be familiar with, but and progressed really quickly into management. But once I at the rental car company, I actually ended up getting into HR. And I got my first opportunity as a recruiter and a trainer. So I did both recruiting and training and development, and it was a blast. And that's how I got into the world of HR, been loving it. So I have a background of both sales and both recruiting. And I like to call myself, I'm a sales professional, recruiting sales professional. In my role currently, I recruit sales professionals and I love it.
Yeah, I've actually heard people say that recruiting is for like recovering salespeople that just need a little bit of a break from the craziness of it all. And I work in sales, so I've considered that before myself.
Yes.
Uh, and so tell us about your family. So you have four kids, right?
Yep, I'm a mom of four. I have four girls, all under the age of 9. So, busy and exciting life. Got a lot going on here, but it's exciting stuff.
Wow. Yeah. You don't see a lot of four kid families these days. I feel like
I
everybody I
know.
know is stopping at two. So kudos to
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Yeah, I
You-
always wanted a big family. It's funny. I used to say, I'm going for 13, but that quickly changed. Once I got to like 3 or 4, I'm like, I don't think we can do the whole 13 thing. But
Yeah.
I've always wanted a big family. It was always just me and my brother. We were a small, family, and I've always wanted a big family. So I love it. I love every moment here.
Now I've heard a few times. I'm curious your thoughts. Two to like once you have the second kid, it's just like so much crazier than the first. That the third and the fourth don't add too much more craziness. Is that true?
Oh, yeah, you know what? I heard that as well too. A lot of people used to tell me after 3 it gets easier. So, we can keep going. I feel like we're in a routine, and I think that's because it's not that it necessarily gets easier. I think you get better. I think as you progress, you start to care less about things that don't matter. And so you're more efficient as a parent. You come into your own a little bit. So I think it does get easier for a lot of reasons, but I think we get stronger. I think we get better. And then also, you have like everyone's all in it together. And yeah, it's fun. I think it does get a little easier.
Do you think that your background in recruiting and sales has informed the way that you parent at all?
Yeah, I love that question. I think that's interesting. Honestly, I feel like, as a parent, it's informed the way that I work and everything. But I would definitely say, like, as a recruiter, how it, informs how I parent, and how I show up for my family. I think one thing that I've always learned, and in recruiting, you have to be prepared. Like I'm very intentional, like as a, someone who values high performance and productivity, like I always plan. I plan my day, the day, the next day, the day before. I plan out my week, and I plan my day the day of as well too. So I'm very intentional about my time. So I've learned as a recruiter to be intentional, to plan, but also in the world of recruiting, things happen. So you got to be prepared to pivot. And I think that's helped me as a person, and it's rolled over in every area of my life, especially parenting, because, you can plan, 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 but when you got little ones, they have their own agenda. Sometimes they don't, and some things you just can't be prepared for. So you just got to pivot. It's no telling, like, you can be ready to walk out the door and then a kid has an accident. I have one as old as 9 and one as young as 2. So you have to be prepared, and you have to be able to move and go with it and not let that mess up your mindset or your space, and really protect and guard your energy. So I think that's what I've learned as, just in the recruiting space. And that's rolled over into how I parent and how I show up as mom.
Yeah, I've been thinking as a salesperson. My daughter is 1 month old, so it's not really relevant yet. But I'm sure there'll be maybe some selling her on certain things and behaviors when she gets a little
Yes.
bit older. So let's talk a
Yes.
little bit. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this. You have 4 kids, you have a full time
Mhm.
career. How do you manage that? How do you balance that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know what? It hasn't always been easy. I can say probably the last few years I've gotten so much better about it. And honestly, like, that's where I feel like I'm in like this new journey, this new stage. But I say the biggest things for me, number one, is being intentional. And I mentioned that before. Even so much, like, I actually have it written down, like, on my vision board. I look at it daily as a reminder of like who I want to be, a value of mine, and that's being intentional. So I start with, who do I want to be as a parent, right? And how do I want to be in every other area? So I would say my number one is always trying to be intentional with my time and who I want to be, so I can show up into those different spaces that way. The next thing I say for me was really, really important. I used to try to pursue balance all the time, and I got frustrated because it wasn't working. I always thought like balance was like a time thing, quantity. But I had a shift a few years ago when I started this journey, and I realized like balance was not feasible for my life. Sometimes things were, demanding more time in different seasons. So I began to seek, what does being present look like for me? And the more I started to seek being present, meaning when I'm at work, I'm all in, I'm working on the thing and I'm there and I'm doing it. I'm very intentional about like, what I want to do during the day, what I want to accomplish. So that way, when it's time to shut off, like, I can shut off. Because when you're pursuing balance and you're only thinking about a time thing, what happens is if you don't know how to shut off, or if you haven't been intentional with your time, you can be with family, but then you're thinking about the things at work that you have to do. So being present, being intentional about what you want to accomplish, that's really, really helped me. And then also when I'm with my family, again, that being present, I'm there with them. So I really try to pursue work life presence versus just like work life balance. And in terms of like, how do I want to be in this moment with them? When I'm looking at my child, I am like adoring her little face, or their faces, and the moments that I have with them, and trying to literally block out anything else. So I pursue that, and it fills my heart so much. Like, I'm a feel person, it fills me up. And so that way I'm not feeling drained or stressed or feeling like, I should be doing something else. Like, I really pursue presence over balance.
Yeah. So how do you do that in practice? Is it really
Mhm.
about just being more mindful when you're in the moment, or how do you pursue work life presence?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple things. Like, so for example, when I'm at work, like being intentional, I very intentional about like what I'm doing with my time. So I literally plan like my week and my day, and I block off things, right? So for example, if I am, like, I schedule the things that I want to do. So I don't even just, decide like, here's what I want to accomplish this week. Like, no, I'm putting it in the calendar, because if it's not calendar, it's probably not going to happen. So this allows me to, at the end of the day, to shut off, because I've been committed and I've done the things that I need to do. So that's what it looks like for me in practice. And then I also have, it's just about having a start time and a quit time as well too. There's always one more call to make. There's always one more thing to do, and your list will always go on and on. So you need to understand like, what's your start time and your quit time, right? Get and be intentional about what you want to plan within your start time and quit time. And then after that, when it's time to quit, quit. And then focus on being present with your family. And the same thing as well too, trying to just put those boundaries in each area of your life. Now, things happen, things come up, and you have to roll with it. But I think once you get really clear on, those boundaries, which is going to be your start time, your quit time, what you want to accomplish, you can walk away feeling like, you know what? this is enough for the day, and you can fully be present. So that's what it's looked like for me, being intentional about what I'm doing and how I'm performing, and also just being so intentional about like when I'm with my family, I want to be there and I want to be present. And so that's what, how the pursuit of being present look like for me. um Trying to think of what else I do, but I just really like just try to be intentional about planning. I even plan about like my family week as well too, upcoming appointments, things that I want to accomplish. I plan and really get a visual of my week of like, things that what I'm going to be wearing. Like the day, I don't just pick out my clothes for the day. Like I batch work at work so I can get more done, and that I'm in that mind space to get the things done. But I also batch decisions at home. So, for example, that's planning out what we're wearing for the week. So I don't have to think about that, every day. Like just thinking about what needs to happen to get done, free up my mind space so that when I'm doing a thing, I can be present to the moment. So I try as much as possible to batch decisions and batch work. So when I'm in a thing, I can do the thing. Does that
Yeah,
make?
it makes perfect sense. I mean, I love a good plan myself, and
Hmm.
my wife is the opposite, so we make a good pair because I do all the planning for us, and
Love
she
that.
just goes with the flow. So it works out pretty well.
I love
Have you
that.
had to make Have you had to make any sacrifices? Like, have you had to make sacrifices in your career for your family, or maybe you've sacrificed family time for your career?
Yeah, I think, everything, it comes in like just different ebbs and flows and waves. And like I mentioned earlier, there's going to be times where, certain things or, might take a priority or have different, demands at different times. So for me, I think early on, I had to make a really, a decision in my career, which was at the time the company that I was working for, it was at minimum 50 hours plus a week, and as I was still really early, in building my family. We were newly married. We had, our oldest was like pretty young at that time. And that just wasn't working for my lifestyle. And, it came to, us really having a conversation about what we wanted our life to look like. And I had to make a decision like that wasn't working. Um, Turns out like when I did try to like, this isn't working and I want to I try to put my 2 weeks in and they're like, you can't just you can't. We will move you closer to your home, so you don't have to commute. You can come in when you want. And they were so flexible at that time where, I just went in a couple days for a couple hours. And that was amazing. And number one, that says a lot of things, right? Number one, that says like the team that I was working for, they really valued me, but they also like valued just trying to be flexible. So even though, at that time I was doing, 50 hours plus a week and that just wasn't working for my lifestyle, they were like, hey, don't quit. We'll work with you. You can come into our offices and just do some training on, customer service and sales, because those are areas that I've gotten a lot of results for as a, manager at the time at different offices. Why don't you come in and you can just do a couple hours a week, do some training, you work with customers and things like that. So it really worked for my lifestyle at that time. But then when we moved at that time over to California, that's where I made that choice to, you know it was time to finally part from that situation and from that company, and just really take some time to focus on like my family. So I took some time off while my oldest, she was young at that time, and just focused on we were in a new environment. We moved to California, and you know so I took some time off from work. There was also another period in my life as well too, where I took a couple years off with baby number three, and I took 2 years off as well too. And for me, I feel like that wasn't even just like a sacrifice. Yeah, I really enjoy working, but it was such a precious time because I was able to, be home and, just be there with all the different moments with her and then my others at that time. So it was very special. But then there came a point where I was just like, okay, I'm ready to go back. Like I'm ready. This is hard.
Yeah,
And
of
I was
course.
ready. And then at that time, I started to, I remember really getting in my mind that I want to get back into the workplace. I want to get back into working. And I'm really big about just getting clear about what you want. And then, like, I feel like things just align. And literally, I remember declaring that. And I ended up getting a text message from it was an old client of mine, when I had worked at a different company, but she reached out and said, "Hey, I have a client that needs, an interim HR director and needs some help at HR consulting. Would you be open to doing this part time?" I had literally just said and made the decision with my husband that I want to get back into the workplace. I wanted to, start trying things out part time. And, you know, for me, that's a big testament of like just being true and aligned to what you want to do. And at the time before, I wanted to stay home. I wanted a little more time with the little ones. And once I felt ready to get back and I made that declaration, things started to line up for me. And I ended up getting an opportunity that came to me, which was amazing. So, it was sacrifices for both. But I think once you just have a clear idea of what you want to do, how you want to be, how you want to show up, things usually just align. And
Yeah. I listened to your podcast and I heard you talk about not identifying with your career or
mhm,
trying not to. I'd like to
yeah.
talk more about that. I know this is a tough thing for a lot of people,
Mhm.
especially new moms, right? If you're ambitious and you really build your career, and then and that might be a big part of your identity, and then you settle down to have a family, and it just can't be anymore, right? So I'd love to hear a little bit
Yeah.
more about your experience there.
Yeah, man, I feel like this is something that I'm always unraveling and unpacking. And honestly, I don't even know where it started. I feel like maybe somewhere in childhood, and I can't tell you why, but I've attached so much of my identity and my worth around performance, around getting the pat on the back, around accolades, around just different things. And it's always motivated me to achieve more and want more. And I feel like every birth that I've given with each child, I feel like I've come closer. There was like a rebirth of me, and I've come closer to who I am and who I'm called to be. And for me, I realized that like I got too much validation from work and performance. And to the point where like I was trying to be a superhero. And I know a lot of times people talk about imposter syndrome, like that's really prevalent in the workplace for moms, for just, women and a lot of things. But one of the things that I struggled with was superhero syndrome. Like, I don't even know if it's a thing, but always wanting to be the hero at work, always wanting to be the hero, at home in every area of my life for my family and my friends, and wanting to always have on that cape. And that became like my identity, the praise and all the different things that you get from that. And I remember my pastor saying like a long time ago, like, if you live by the praises of man, you'll die by their criticism. And that really stuck with me. And so I've been doing a lot of self work on that and detaching from things, from accomplishments, from accolades, and really trying to do the deep work within and asking myself, like, why is that even important? What do you want? What do you really want? Right. And I found that a lot of things that I thought I wanted, like titles, positions, things like that, that actually wasn't what I really wanted. So I started to peel back the layers. And, I feel like sometimes it starts with getting clear on like your values. And once you get clear on your values, it'll inform the things that you want. And when I got clear on my values, I realized that some of the things that I was seeking was not aligned with the things that I proclaimed was my values. So I had to decide which one I wanted. And I actually really did want that value. I wanted that to be how I showed up in the world. So it's a pursuit. It's something I'm always working on and unraveling and detaching from. But I'm learning every day to detach from outcomes, to detach from accolades, from accomplishments, and to really to hold true to who I am. Because at the end of the day, all of those things can change. I think with everything that's going on, you're probably familiar. There was a lot of layoffs recently, a lot of different things, a lot of uncertainty in the market. And in an instant, your title, things can change, things can be taken away from you, things that you worked for, even in your personal life possessions, all those things can be taken from you. But one thing that no one can really take from you is who you are. So I feel like I'm always focusing on in the moment who I want to be, right? Even as things change and shift. Like I have things going on right now in my life, but I'm focused on like, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? Because I know if I'm true to that, everything starts aligning for me. And like I am on this journey of doing the self-work of detaching myself from the things that are not of my identity. So I hope that makes sense. I feel like it's a long process, and it's a process. It's a work in progress. But I can definitely say, like, even over the last 6 months, like the way that I've handled some of the things, like I'm proud of the way that I've showed up. I'm proud of the way that I've handled some of the uncertainty, in the way that I'm protecting my peace and my energy so I can show up for my family the right way. Like, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
proud.
I just I gotta repeat that quote. If you live by the praises of man, you'll die by their criticisms. That's I'm gonna get
Yeah,
that tattooed on me. I think that's a good one.
yeah.
I think
It's the my.
it's so easy to get caught up in external validation, right? I'm sure it does. To your
Mhm.
point, relate to childhood and the way we were raised, and I'm sure we could
Yeah.
talk about that for about 8 hours, but
Yeah.
we're not going to go there right now. But yeah, you're right. It does involve a lot of work and
Yeah.
untangling where that need for external validation comes from.
Yeah, we'll save that for, like, a therapy session. Like, I'm no,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
professional in that realm,
yeah,
so, I'll let you
yeah.
connect with your therapist.
Yeah, yes, good idea. So in addition to having 4 kids and having a full-time career, you also have a podcast, the,
Yes.
Own Your Work podcast, which I'm a fan
Mhm.
of. So
Thank you.
how was starting a podcast when you already have this busy schedule, and how have you been able to slot time in to do that?
Yes. Oh my. So I actually, it's funny when I go to log into my host, it says your podcast is 4 years old, right? Almost 4 years. Can you believe? Like I had this idea, I started it 4 years ago, but I never actually hit publish. I would play around, hit record. I did all the things, made a cover, even an intro, but I was so afraid. And I think one of the good things that has recently come out of all of this crazy uncertainty is that it allowed me to take a pause and realize, like, hey, you've been given so much to everyone. What do you want to do? What about those dreams that, has been on your heart that you put to the side? What about those things? Why don't you give those things an opportunity to see the light of day? And, so for me, like that is the reason why, like, I made the decision to push forward and to find the time. A lot of times there's so many things taking up our time, but we can eliminate a lot of the different things. You can outsource things, like figure out what you want to do and make the time, and prioritize those things. So, you know, um, and I'm also in an exploration phase. I don't feel like I'm going to have it all figured out, but I'm like, my plan is to figure it out. My plan is to figure out how can I make this work. So I try different things. And my goals for the first couple months is to figure out a rhythm. Figure out how to make good content, figure out how to get into a rhythm, figure out if I like doing it. I've had this dream, and sometimes you don't even know if it's something that will excite you until you actually do it. A lot of times we want clarity, and we try to get plans in our head, but the best way to get clarity is to take action. And I love a quote by I think it's Marie Forleo, where she talks about clarity comes from engagement, not thought. And like sometimes you just got to get out there and do. If you want
Yeah.
more clarity, if you want to figure out if this can work for you, if it can work for your life, if it excites you, give it a try. Try to do it. And so I've been doing that, and I feel like it's a sweet spot because I'm talking about things that I actually really excited about. I love career development, like that's why I love recruiting. I love talking to people every day about their career goals and helping them. I'm like a self-proclaimed like self-help junkie. I read all the books, so I can talk about it all day, because it's a personal journey of mine. But I actually wanted to do something, and I wanted to start using my voice as well. So for me, I created my own playing field, and I always recommend people to do that. And I do think it took a lot of just the uncertainty of things going on, and also to the process of me unraveling my identity from like my work, and trying to find the things that I love outside of the day to day, outside of work, outside of performance, and just try something, explore, do something. And yeah, it's been working. I actually pleasantly found out that I actually really enjoy doing it. I enjoy getting behind the mic, talking. I can talk all day. I enjoy doing it and trying to make it work. And I love that my kids, they get to see me doing it as well too. My oldest daughter, what makes me happy is when I remember she came in and she saw that I was on episode 12, and like tears were almost in her eyes because she's like, "Mommy, I'm so proud of you, Mom." Like Tears were all like
Oh,
almost in her eyes because I was on episode 12. Like, she's like, "You're really doing it," and she's actually a listener too. She's like, "Mom, I was listening to your episode." When it launched, she was like, listened to it at after school care. She was like, "Mom, I listened to the first 3 episodes." Like, she's a fan. She's like, "Mom, I'm like your number one fan." And like that it excites me, and I want her to see the same thing, and I want her to do the same thing for herself. I want her to like pursue the things that's on her heart relentlessly. Give it a chance, give it a shot. So I don't know. I feel
that's
like I said
awesome.
a lot.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I always ask people if they think about the way their kids see the way that they're approaching their own career, and it sounds
Mhm.
like you definitely do, and that's great that you're excited to inspire her and show her that what you're doing is possible. And I think for the listeners as well, like I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that wanted to start something on the side. I mean, I can relate to doing some of the steps and then not hitting publish or just not really like
Mhm.
putting it out there and it just kind of sits on the shelf. So I'm sure people can
Yeah.
relate to that. The other half of that I want to ask you about is people again, they want to do something but they have a job, and so how do you manage that? And we could edit this out if you can't talk about it, but like how do you set expectations with work? What are you allowed to say? What aren't you allowed to say?
Yeah,
You share things on
absolutely.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think for me, part of with everything, I had to really ask myself, like, one of the things that you own is your personal brand. No matter what. So I am more than just the company that I work for. There's so much more to me, and what I do can also bring value to my company as well too. So I am very comfortable with promoting, and talking about what I'm doing on LinkedIn. I am so blessed that I actually have a manager that 100% supports me as well too. I mean, like when I launched a podcast, she sent a message to the team is like, "Y'all, go download it. Like right now, you have to listen to this." And and not only just our team, but to the broader team, like, "Y'all, Sonia started a podcast. Like listen to it." And then to have that support from like your coworkers and your like, I wasn't expecting it at all. You know, but that's been amazing as well too, and I mean, I just have a just amazing support system at work. So I love that. But also just like I feel like when it comes to finding the time, so for me, I have a good space of between when the time between the kids when they go to school and before I start actually start work. So I used to use that time for like just being out in nature. I would go out, sit out, listen to the waterfall on the fountain, or sometimes listen to the birds singing, have my coffee or my drink, read or anything like that. And I still prioritize a lot of those things as well too. But now I've started to move some of that time. I'm not waking up earlier. I still wake up at 6 a.m. But I try to shift some of that time so that like for me, getting and working on my dreams is also a form of self care, and but doing it in a way where I'm not expecting perfection for myself. Like every time I publish, I hit record, I celebrate, not because it's better, not because it's perfect, but because I showed up for myself and I did it and I gave it a try and I was courageous. And that's a form of self care as well, too, giving myself permission to just show up in this world. So, although, my little self care routine where, I'm sipping on coffee outside, listening to the birds, I probably don't do that as often. I still do it, I take my breaks throughout my day. I'm not someone who's just thinking like push through, sit at your computer and get like, I take my breaks. I prioritize self care throughout my day, but I listen to like my body and my mind as well too. And I know when I need to pivot. I know when I need to take a break as well too. But so I make time early in the morning after the kids are ready and out to school. I make time to figure out what I'm going to work on, what I want to work on, whether it be a recording or, batch editing or just different things. And again, be intentional. Like every week I set like, what do I want to accomplish this week in my podcast? How much time am I able to give? So for me, I probably somewhere around like 4 hours a week. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. It's just depending. But one day I hopefully I'll be able to scale and like give a little bit more. But right now I know that I'm only able to give maybe an hour a day or less to be able to work on that. Like on the weekends, I usually try not to work on it as well. So it really is during the weekdays, like the early mornings, where I'm taking that time by myself before start time to work on to make some progress on that one specific thing that I've already said I wanted to accomplish and do that week, and do that. And I do it with batching, whether it's batch recording, batch editing, working on like tasks at the same time, so I can really just make the most of my time. So yeah, I think that's just what I try to focus on, those two things: effectiveness, efficiency, working on the right thing with my time, and then trying to have the right system in place so I can do it, the best as possible. But I also just think, as someone balancing it all, or managing it all, I feel like you really just got to let go of perfection. Like, that's been huge for me. And listen to your, like, if I don't, I want to be consistent. If I miss a week, like, that's okay. Like, I'm okay with that, like, I'm okay with that. I'm so at peace, but I'm so proud of what I've done so far. So I think just listening to yourself, let go of these pressures of the world, how they say you have to show up, and show up how you want to show up, and celebrate when you do show up in that way. Like, that's what it is. Like, know who you want to be and how you want to show up. So like, that's what I do throughout my week. So it is, again, about maybe 4 hours. I do an hour a day, sometimes less, just depending on what I have to give with energy. And I try to figure out what's going to make the biggest impact, and I do that. um,
Yeah.
I still
You,
got a
you
whole
are
lot more to work on, though.
No,
There's so much growth area, but
you're dropping some real nuggets right now. I got to say. I mean, working on your dreams is self care. That's another great quote. There's a lot of gems we're dropping here. I love that one, and I can totally relate because I have my little morning routine where I drink my tea and I read my book and I work out, and then and I have a lot of time before work, and it's like, okay, well, I can do that, or I can actually work on something on the side before I have to do work, right? And I think
mhm.
that, to your point, I still make time for those things, but I never thought about it before, but it is true. Self care, working on your dreams is a form of self care. So
Yeah.
love that. All right,
Awesome.
we're going to move into our final segment here. It's called Sonia's Advice Corner. So I'm going to ask you
Ooh.
for some advice on a few
Okay.
topics. Okay, you ready?
All right. Let's do it.
All right. What advice would you give to someone who's about to be a mom and has a career they still want to focus on?
Yeah. I would say, even if I was speaking, I would say, honestly, those things that I mentioned earlier, I would say, number one, be intentional. Like, really get a clear vision of who you want to be and how you want to show up in the world. That's as a mom, as a parent, as a spouse, and as an employee as well too. As a, how do you want to show up in each place, right? Be intentional, and like, work backwards from that place. Like, what does that actually look like? Get a clear vision of it. You don't have to, Stephen Covey talks about, beginning with the end in mind, right? In that book, Seven Habits. But, they talk about, like, you're at your funeral, or deathbed. A lot of times we think about it like that, but I had another way, because that might be too morbid for people. So you can always just think about it like you're at your retirement party. What do you want people to say at your retirement party? And at your retirement party, there's like your friends, and there's your family, there's your coworkers, there's a mix. So think about, like, how you want to show up in all those areas, and then go for it. Like, get a clear vision. I'd also say, like I mentioned earlier, be present. Like, be present. So be intentional with your time as well too. Plan so you can show up those ways, but then be really present. Let go of perfection and just really be present to the moment. Be present to every moment with your family. Be present when you are at work, and give your best. Work wholeheartedly. But when it's time to shut off, like, be okay. Shut off. Like, it's gonna be okay. Shut off. Like, unless you're like a surgeon or something, but
Yeah, then stay on
but
until you're done.
besides that, you can shut off. Like, so shut off and be present, focus on that. Those, I feel like, are really big things. And then the other one as well too is just be aligned to that vision that you have for yourself. Be really clear on your values, so that way, if you know what you value, sometimes we skip that step, but you can actually begin to, like, create a life that's really in line. It informs what kind of job you take. It informs, how you parent. So get an idea, be intentional about who you want to be, get clear on your values, and start showing up that way, and be really, really present. Let go of perfection. I said a lot.
What advice? No, all good. All good. What advice would you give to somebody who is afraid to hit publish on that thing that they've
Mm,
created?
just do it. hit publish. If you are afraid to hit publish, I mean, like, do it anyways. Just hit publish, hit it scared, hit it afraid, and like put it out there. And because I think that's just what it comes down to. I think there's like really nothing you can say. You just do it. Just do it. Like, don't overthink it. Just
Just
do
do it.
it. And then
Just do
just
it,
keep
everyone.
doing it and get better. And just know that you're practicing for what? I don't know, but you just keep practicing and just do it again and show up and do it again. But just do it. Hit publish.
Hit publish. What is the best advice you've ever received?
Yeah. So that's a really, really good question. So I've received so much advice, but one that always stands out to me, and I feel like it might be cliche. Many people probably heard it before. And I have a lot of good advice from this one particular person who was like very instrumental early on in my career when years ago. And she shared a couple of things with me. Number one, she always said, like, assume the position and a title follow. Like that just helped me with my performance to know that, like, I was always performing at the next level. But another thing that she said to me, and it just really is like, you're in the driver's seat of your career. And for me, I feel like that just, she said that one line, but there was so much things that was infused in that for me, which means that no matter what, even if I'm put in a situation that's not ideal, or not like the best of circumstances, like, I'm in the driver's seat. Like, I own it. If I'm not getting the training that I need to open my mouth. I need to learn how to self advocate for myself, and at the end of the day, like, I'm responsible for how I end up. I am responsible for my career. I'm responsible. So, like, I'm always like, no matter what, even when I'm faced with ultimatums, even when I'm faced with like situations when I need to make decisions, I know ultimately, even if the situation is ideal, like, I own this. Like, and I can make my own like opportunity. And like, that is something that just really stuck with me. Like, I'm in the driver's seat of my career. I own my work. I am yeah. So I think that's it.
Love it. What advice would you give to your former self?
Yeah. I would tell her to start the self-work earlier. Um the whole journey of detaching from work and your identity from work, I would say, like, start that early. I would tell her, that there's so much more to you than your performance, than accolades and accomplishments. I would tell her to, start to look inside and do the inner work, do the inner job first. And that would be, like, my best advice, and I would tell her, honestly, I would say, "Whatever it is you wanna start, give it a chance, give it a try, do it." The best time to start is now, like, just start whatever it is. But that would be the advice that I would give to my younger self. Start the inner work now, like, there's so much more to you than your job, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Last question. I have a 1 month old daughter,
Mhm.
first child as well. What
Congrats.
advice? Thank you. What advice do you have for me as a dad of a 1 month old daughter?
Be present. Soak in every little moment, pursue like being like making memories, like take mental pictures of that little cute face, like really just let your heart soak it in. Really be present. Shut off anything else. When you're there, be present because she needs you, not all the different things that we think. She needs you. So be present. And yeah, and just have a lot of self grace with yourself, self compassion. Um, you know, uh, no one's perfect. So have a lot of compassion for yourself, your partner, um, and but most importantly, just be present in the moment.
Yeah. Love it. All right. Sonia, this is a great conversation. Where can people go to connect with you, learn more about you, anything you want to share?
Yeah. All right. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Sonja Holmes, recruiter, and you can also find me on Instagram. I'm there. It's Sonia on the mic. I think that's what it is. No. And
I'll
that's
link.
S
I'll
O
link to
N
it in the
J
show.
A.
Okay.
That's SONJA. Mike is MIC. So it's Sonja on the mic because Sonja's on the mic. And those are really the places to connect with me. You can also find me at sonjaholmes.com, where you can learn more about the podcast and just a little bit more about what I do. But that's the best way to connect with me.
Awesome. I will link to all that in the show notes as well. Sonja Holmes,
Awesome.
ladies and gentlemen. Sonja, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah.